You see this on screen? All these characters sorted by role and tier, all the little descriptors under their picture. It's pretty cool, right? Now what if I told you it doesn't matter at all? Hello everybody, my name is Christian, and today we are going to be talking about tier lists in HSR. We're going to talk about tier lists as a whole and how they work, why tier lists aren't the end all be all, and what you can actually gain from tier lists. This is going to be a big doozy of an episode more than likely, but I hope you all enjoy regardless. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, become a YouTube member down below, join our Discord because people are yelling at me to plug it again. Alright, so this is something that I have thought about making for quite some time because perception around tier lists has always been interesting in the HSR community. People always have this perception that they are the end all be all, which, hey, I get it. You want to be confident in your opinion. The problem is that some of you have the opinion that Mordenak's blade is bad, and that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. You should genuinely be sent to Guantanamo. Alright. But, genuinely, tier lists are something that exist in every sort of game like this. They are always going to be prevalent in any sort of game that has so many characters and that lends itself to ranking. Basically anything where you can put two characters directly next to each other and you can actually see who's better and you have a basis for comparison. Tier lists are not meant to be a bad thing. They are more often meant to be a helpful thing. But then somehow, even then, we have learned to just weaponize it against each other, and that is kind of crazy, but overall, tier lists are a relatively good thing in most community. They are something that are going to educate you, to help you learn what is an easy pick, what is a good pick, what is a rewarding pick in any sort of game that you're playing, anything like that. That is the purpose of a good tier list. And realistically, I know people are always gonna give Predwin flack. I think Predwin does as good of a job as possible to make a tier list for a game like HSR. Genuinely, I feel as though they do a good job. I have been a rather outspoken defender of Predwin in the past because I think people just dog on it constantly. And yes, I do understand. For some of their older entries nowadays, I do agree. It is not good. But for a lot of the more recent entries, ever since probably 3.x, they have consistently been better in my opinion, and they still have that kind of shit-all reputation that really isn't deserved if we're being honest. Let's look at what they do to make a good tier list. They literally have hundreds and thousands of players to help give them opinions, to help give them data so that they can sort it, track it, and then make an objective tier list based on the data that they receive. They also write review sections of pros and cons and give you detailed overviews of how units work so that you can understand the placements, you can understand the purpose of the unit and why they might be in that spot. They do a pretty good job, and they also compile data for all of the endgame modes so you can see exactly why these characters are performing so well, performing so badly. It is all there for you to look at and understand. And genuinely, that is very high value that we should not take for granted. If you are just looking to make as objective of a list as possible and you are just trying to make statistically viable choices, Predwin does a very good job with that. Yet they still get an immense amount of hatred from the community at large. Again, some of these reasons, I can understand it, but the big thing is that how many of you have ever tried making a tier list? It's not easy, and the big thing is tier lists are always going to be subject to bias and personal opinion. If one of you who is very knowledgeable in the comments, like let's say somebody who zero cycles king, if you go and make your tier list right now, what would it look like? Would you have Archer super high up now? Would you have Firefly lower because you think you need more investment on her? Would you move DOT super low because they aren't even capable of zero cycling king in most cases? How would you do that? Think about it, and then if you put that out, you are now at scrutiny from so many players because your personal bias is always going to come out when you make those types of lists. There are always going to be people who disagree, who have a different perception, have a different bias. That is always going to exist when you make these types of lists. If you don't believe that so much of the community would agree with like a very respected or very highly, tested opinion, we have done this. I have literally done this. A while ago, I did a stream that took all of the data I had compiled from doing a survey to as many people as I could get it to about who they thought the best characters in the game were. I had a bunch of people make a complete tier list right before 4.x came out. So, when we looked at those results, do you want to guess what we saw? Please take a guess. It was almost identical to Preedwin. The way I had sorted everything out, I believe that anything above a 4.5 was deemed as a top tier character. Almost every character that was top tier in Preedwin at that point was also a top tier for the data I had compiled. This is because I did that same thing of I let everybody participate. And yes, there was some wildly different opinions because the biggest thing was always where Moz was placed. If Moz was placed very low, that was more likely than not a more casual opinion. Not even like a hyper casual opinion or anything like somebody who doesn't play the game a lot. You can genuinely zero cycle MOC without knowing that Moz is actually pretty good. That is a 100% possible. So that was one opinion that was very common. But then there was quite a few people who I knew were hyper min-maxers, who were zero cycling kings, zero cycling every form of content in this game, trying to get low cycle clears for something like the Genius Archive. Those are the people who usually had Moz even higher, who had Topaz even lower, and who actually placed way more value into a lot of more outdated supports. Because even somebody like Robin, who, yes, at that point in time wasn't getting a lot of use, she still has a lot of that value because of a 100% action advance. Something that a more casual player might not be as influenced by. They have a new Tribby, or nowadays you have your new Mordenax blade to work with. When we ran that test and we got all those results back, it was very clear that it was almost identical to the tier list that already existed within our community. And yes, there were some varying opinions that I saw from higher level players, but it ended up not mattering because we had to do a collective survey. This tier list stuff is nowhere near as easy as you think it would be. And again, that is just proof that no matter how good of a player you are, there are going to be countless people who will completely disagree with, and it will not be close either. Tier lists are just something that can vary so much from game to game, and that value can change so much, but regardless, the process is never going to be easy. At this point, I'd like to quickly talk about a different game that I am also fairly knowledgeable about still, which is going to be Super Smash Bros. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This is a game that is also very big with tier lists. Tier lists are a constant in that community. People constantly sharing their opinions on the characters, the meta, all that good stuff. And there is just as much kind of turmoil within the community about all of these tier lists for a very similar reason, despite how absolutely different the games and process are. A big thing that ends up being the difference between these two types of games is that Smash Ultimate is a PvP game, whereas HSR is PvE. In a game like Smash Ultimate, player skill, player ability, and the ability of your opponent is what can mainly factor in to performance of a character. If you are just a very, very good player, you can drag a bad character up the tier list because you're so good and you make them look that good. In HSR, that is only possible to a certain extent because the PvE format consistently means that content is going to keep getting harder while your character will stay the same. Your playing ability might get better, but that will not stop the content from continuously getting harder and harder and harder to the point that eventually the character will just get left behind and then they will drop down the tier list. In a game like Smash Ultimate, that doesn't happen. There have been characters who have been top tier since they came out, and they will remain top tier for the end of time. For example, Minecraft Steve. I hate that character, it's why I stopped playing, but hey, he's pretty good. These types of differences are also why tier lists can be so volatile for a game like Star Rail. Player ability does not matter nearly as much as the actual character strength and the exact content you're playing into. There is one way to circumvent this, and this is where the actual point of a tier list can be helpful to you. Essentially, looking at a tier list, if you go to like tier 2 of Predwin and look at the available characters, you're going to see Mighty, Fei Xiao, Aglaya, Boothill, Sela, the Herda, and Rappa. All of these characters are considered not that like top tier anymore. They are not considered the top end of the game right now. But if you were to invest into any of these characters or their teams, they are going to perform just as good as any of the current top tiers right now. Go look at the Genius Archive, the site for all of the Zero Cycles. You are probably going to see Aglaya clears, Rappa clears, Boothill clears, Sela clears for sure, Herda clears, Mighty clears, and Fei Xiao clears on at least one of the previous King stages, I'm pretty sure. And if not on the King stages, you're gonna see Zero Cycles on the Knights, because I have definitely seen Zero Cycles on the Knights with all of these characters. And I know, as a matter of fact, multiple of these characters have managed to clear a King stage ever since 4.0 started. I know that Boothill has done it. I know that Mighty has done it. I'm pretty sure that Fei Xiao has done it. All of these characters are honestly still pretty good if you are willing to put in that investment for them. This is where I think the strength of tier lists can actually come in for a game like Star Rail, because it reminds us that investment is the king when it comes to this game. You are going to see the absolute most value, absolute most strength out of your account when you actually give characters what they need to succeed. When you invest into their Eidolons, you get that powerful E1, E2. When you get that best teammate, you end up getting like E1 Tribute for the Herda, you end up getting the new Mordenax Blade nowadays. You end up getting Ash Veil for Fei Xiao, and then you end up getting her E2. This is what tier lists can actually provide to us in the current day context, and specifically for Star Rail as a whole. They are going to be kind of a measure of how much you need to invest to actually get the most use out of this character. There is, of course, going to be a limit to this, but for the most part, if you are not concerned about zero cycling the King stage, which is not a priority and should not be a priority for most of the player base, then almost any character can still work if you are willing to put in that commitment and that effort. Even somebody like fucking Jing Yuan. If you were to get Jing Yuan and you were to get maybe an E2 Blade alongside him, which will increase follow-up damage, which, reminder, Lightning Lord is follow-up damage, and then you get like an invested Sunday and another very powerful support for Jing Yuan, guess what? Jing Yuan is probably still 3-cycling whatever content you want to put him in that suits him. Is it going to be the easiest thing in the world? Probably not. Will you be able to clear? Absolutely. That is what tier lists can help us understand. The problem with that is that people also take this in the exact inverse direction, which should not be what we are doing. People will see Rappa at tier 2. She is lower than both other break characters. They will see that and think, oh, Rappa is just a disgustingly bad character. She deserves to have been forgotten about by Hoyo for however long she was forgotten about. She is not deserving of a spot amongst the top tiers. Get her out of here. Waste of oxygen, waste of space character. That is not the mindset we should be going into this with. Rappa is not a great character. I personally do believe that Boothill is definitely better, and then Firefly also absolutely better. Firefly is by far the best break character in the game, but hey, that's just how shill works. Oh well. This doesn't mean that Rappa is a bad character, however. If you were to give Rappa the same amount of investment with like an E2 Dahlia, an E2 Fugue, HMC, and then Rappa on the team, you are still going to do extremely well in most forms of content, and you are still going to be able to clear things very competitively, like 1, maybe 2 cycles at most on a lot of the existing content we have in this game. That is not a bad thing by any means. But instead, we are using the tier list as a way to tear down characters and as a way to basically say that you can only use the top tiers if you want to have any form of success in this game, if you want to have any form of fun. That is not the case. It has never been the case. And especially if you are actually that concerned about fun, investment should be even more important to you so you can actually use those favorite characters. Just tearing down characters while also using Silverwolf, but then still not getting the good clear that you want to because you don't know what you're doing. What are we accomplishing with that? Sorry, I'm kind of spiraling a little bit now, but Jesus Christ, these people on Twitter are actually so stupid, it's impressive. Like, oh my god. Tier list discourse and also just power creep discourse has gotten worse than ever before, and now people are always using some form of tier list placement to just completely disprove somebody's entire argument or to make an entire argument saying that the HSR meta is the worst it's ever been. Guys, tier list will never matter that much. Aglaya being in tier 1.5 is not the end-all be-all of this entire game. If you are an Aglaya player, you can still get like 3 cycles on like Nikador, on Hule, on quite a few other bosses. The thing that matters the most in this game will always be investment, and it will always be the enemy that you're fighting. Shill matters a lot in this game because there are some enemies you are just not going to be able to successfully fight with a multitude of characters. Like, do I really want to do, let's say, Mighty on Lygus? No, I do not particularly want to do that. Do I want to do, let's say, Rappa onto Sparksicon? No. Not particularly. It's not awful, but it's certainly not good either. There are just some things that do not work with any character in this game. We've just seen it with the newest AA boss, Graphia. Graphia was released in a point where the 2 most common characters that people were planning to use on her were Evanescia and Silverwolf, who are also part of the main pushes of this planet, Inhalation. Neither of those went that well. It ended up being Ashvale and Blade, and then Himiko Nova with investment, who ended up being the absolute best choices against Graphia to actually get good, consistent clear. That's kind of crazy. And yes, those are all good characters, but even then you see good characters completely failing for the most part. This is something that tier lists simply cannot tell you. They cannot teach you. You are not going to be prepared for the new boss that requires you to like sacrifice a baby mid-game by just having Mighty on your account or by just having, I don't know, Ashvale on your account. This is why tier lists only have so much bearing. They can be helpful. They can give you an idea of where you can start with a character, how good they can be ideally, or how much you need to do to make them decent. But those 2 big things of investment and shill, you're not gonna get that from a tier list, and the sooner we all understand that and stop weaponizing this as the end-all be-all to every single argument online is the moment that I feel like things are going to get a little bit better, because right now, we're nowhere close to that. It's nowhere close to getting better, and somehow we still have this exact argument every single month. What are we doing here, guys? Oh, I need an ibuprofen. Alright. That's gonna end off my rant for today. I apologize that I went a little off script there. I just get, oh my god, I just get really mad at this community sometimes. Like, Jesus Christ. It's like the people who are saying Gilgamesh, like, absolutely sucks. Like, no, Gilgamesh is actually pretty good because Gilgamesh makes using Saber easier for anybody who might want to use Saber. He is deserving of a fine placement, and he is deserving of being considered a good character. It's stuff like that where it's just like, are we that far lost as a community, bro? Like, is that it? Oh, man. Anyway, well, I hope you guys all enjoyed. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts in the comments about, you know, tier lists and if they are actually that important, blah, 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 blah. Hopefully it's civil down there. And yeah, I've got plenty more good videos coming out soon, so I will see you guys then. Bye-bye.